Hello, dog lover. In this video, I'm going to talk to Scott J. Marshall, aka Dog Dad, about raw diet and all about raw diet, the levels of raw diet that you may or may not have started yet with raw diet. This is an idea that we're going to share with you. That level one is you haven't even started feeding your dog raw diet. Level two is you have done a little bit of raw diet with your dog. And level three, we're going to talk about that at the end of the video. But first of all, let me introduce to you to Scott J. Marshall, aka Dog Dad. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm awesome, Saro. How are you? I think this is our fourth video together. Maybe fourth, something like that.
Maybe, yes. It's been a while though, but I'm glad that we're doing this. And how are things going in your side?
Awesome. We have 3.0, or the third version of my course that's coming out on June 10th. So it's been really busy on this end, but busy is a good thing. That means you're making an impact, right?
Good. Yes. So tell us a little bit about this 3.0. What do you offer to our dog people?
So 3.0 is basically the third version of the course that I've had out for about 2 years now. So the first major change we're taking on the 10th is putting it onto a new platform, and then we're going to start doing updates and additions to content to give beginners the information that they need to go from I want to start raw feeding, but I have no idea how, to I'm 4 weeks in, I'm on my own, I know what I need to be doing and what you should be doing afterwards. So that's really the whole point, is from A to Z. That's
exactly what we're going to cover today in this video, kind of A to maybe Y. And then the Z would be in the next video, which would be posted on your channel. So make sure to subscribe to my channel and Scott's channel, Dog Dad. I'm going to have all the information in the description below that you can go ahead and check both channels and learn about everything about raw diet. And also make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon as well, so you will get notified as soon as those videos are posted. So yes. Today I want to start, Scott, with this idea that I'm still feeding my dog kibble. I'm feeding. I have some samples here. This I'm feeding one of the best. I spend a lot of money on this kibble. I'm feeding this food. It's called Now, and it says 100% fresh. So, it's grain free as well. I'm still feeding kibble, and this one says low fat, and it's kangaroo, and it's one of the most expensive foods too. And I have another expensive kibble. This is for all dogs, and and it says delivered fresh. And when I open this bag, oh my God, it stinks. And it's like, look at this. It's fresh. It says it's fresh. So I'm still feeding kibble, right? And I have all these expensive bags. What is wrong with this picture? Why do I need even to consider changing my dog to raw diet after feeding my dog, fresh, natural food? So explain to us.
So there's a ton of stuff we could talk about. We could talk about the sourcing of some of these foods, how drugs used for euthanizing pets ends up in some of these foods. We could talk about poor packaging that ends up ripping, which makes all the fats in the foods oxidize on the shelf, which basically means they go rancid. But I think one of the biggest things that people can relate to the most, because they can compare it to their own diets, is that a lot of these foods, even the expensive ones, even the prescription diet ones, even the ones with the prettiest packaging and the glossiest packaging and all these different things, a lot of these foods are anywhere from 35 to 50% carbs and sugar. And I mean, if we walked up to our doctor today, you know, our human doctors, Saro and I went to the doctor and said, Scott and Saro's doctor, we're thinking about going on a diet of 50% sugar and carbohydrates. What do you think? They'd look at us and go, do you have a death wish? Like, no, that's not a good idea. But for some reason, we're in this place where somehow it's acceptable to do that for dogs that are typically thought of as carnivores. They're meat eaters. They're predators. I mean, everything about dogs screams predator and meat eater, right? Mm-hmm. Their teeth, the way their bodies are designed biomechanically, their pads are nice and big and wide with their claws for pivoting and chasing animals. I mean, everything about these dogs screams carnivore and predator, right? But somehow we have deemed it appropriate because of the very successful and very well-funded marketing of big pet food companies to accept the fact that, okay, a diet in 35 to 50% sugar is okay for these dogs, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, it's just, I mean, this term gets thrown around a lot now, but in no way is a diet of 35 to 50% carbs and sugar a species appropriate diet for a dog. It's insane. It's insane.
You know, one of the things that I've learned actually is, you know, the farms and, you know, those farmers that they take care of cows and pet, you know, their animals, because they want to make them more profitable and want to make them fat, they feed them carbs. They feed them, you know, grains and things like that, so they will get fat faster and sooner, so they can sell them faster and make more money.
Yep.
So we're doing the same thing now. Besides that, it causes, you know, to develop fat and sugar and all that. It is not a natural diet for dogs, and one of the words that I think most dog owners have to start learning is species-appropriate diet, which the kibble is not species-appropriate diet. And one of the main reasons that they should be considering changing their dog's diet from kibble to raw diet, can you share some of those reasons why they should change?
I mean, you said it all basically in the one statement there, right? Species appropriate. I mean, we as humans, we like to anthropomorphize our dogs. Basically, we like to think of our dogs as people, right? And so we get into this space where we also want to feed them like us. So we start going, oh, well, maybe I should put you on a vegetarian diet. Maybe I should put you on a vegan diet. Maybe I should do this, and this, right? And sometimes that's a good thing. If you're somebody that eats all organic foods and you want to make sure that your dog gets all organic foods, that's a good thing. But when we start doing things like wanting to feed dogs vegan diets, it's not species appropriate. So that's the biggest reason. I mean, there's all kinds of pieces and components to all that, but the biggest reason is to give these animals what nature designed them to consume. They were designed to consume meats, bones, organs, fur, feathers, brains, eyeballs. I mean, we can get as gruesome as you want, but this is what these dogs are designed to eat. It's not species appropriate. I mean, really, that's the best way to say it. In order for our dogs to live the happiest, hopefully longest, healthiest lives that they possibly can, they need to eat the foods that they were designed to eat. I mean, look at us as human beings. The more processed foods that we consume, you know, in this example, the kibble being the processed food for the dogs, the same food every single day for their entire lives, the more processed foods that we eat as human beings, the more problems that we experience. Our lives get shorter. We have more issues like pulmonary, you know, lung breathing issues, heart problems, diabetes, obesity, joint problems, lower cognitive function, and all of these things are, along with, you know, the lowering rates of exercise in our pets, all of these things combined do horrendous things to the lifespan and overall quality of life for our dogs. I mean, look at the studies that they did with the Great Dane that Rodney Habib mentioned in his first TED Talk, and I'm paraphrasing the numbers here, but back in the 70s, the average lifespan for a Great Dane was, you know, 14 to 18 years old.
Wow.
Now, if you have a Great Dane that lives past 8 years old, they're considered a senior dog. So that to me is unacceptable. And a large portion of that is their diet. There's other things like environmental factors, exercise, of course, which you're huge about on your channel, being a dog trainer, but diet is another one of those things. Like, you can't fix the environment and exercise away a bad diet. And that, to me, is the biggest reason to feed a species appropriate diet, is to give the dog's body the fuel, the ingredients, everything else that they need and what they're designed for to have that happy, healthy, hopefully longer life.
Exactly. So we want them, instead of just surviving, we want them to thrive.
Yes. Yep.
So let's say, okay, I understand, okay, I'm giving crap to my dog and this is not healthy. And, I've heard of raw diet. I have no idea what raw diet is. What is raw diet? How do I get started on raw diet? Level 1.
So level 1, I guess, would be just accepting the idea that you can feed fresh foods to your dog and they're not going to get sick. Because one of the biggest problems with all of this is what I've already mentioned, is the very successful and very well-funded marketing campaigns that have been going on for decades from these big pet food companies, saying things like, don't give your dogs fresh foods. You're going to give them an unbalanced diet. You're going to make them sick. Everybody in the family is going to get salmonella and E. coli poisoning, and all these different scare tactics that put people into a box to think the only safe way that I can feed my dog is out of a bag, which just isn't true in any sense. So the first level would be accepting that your dog can eat fresh foods, and then maybe start adding some fresh foods into the diet. There's some people out there that just go, I'm gung-ho, I'm ready to go, I'm going to start reading books, I'm going to go through Scott's course, I'm going to, whatever it is that they do to learn stuff, and they just go straight into the diet head on. 100%, they just quit kibble cold turkey and go to raw foods. But for a lot of people, they need kind of an introductory period, level 1, if you will. And for me, that would be adding fresh foods. And there's tons of stuff that you can do. You can take away 20% of their kibble and replace it with a complete and balanced pre-made food, like Answer's pet food and so on. Taking 20% of their kibble out, putting that same amount of Answer's food in there, and poof, you got a huge boost to their diet. And even just 20% change in their diets have shown clinically, like they've done studies on this, have major impacts on disease markers in dogs. You can do things like adding in fresh, low glycemic, that part's important, fresh, low glycemic, meaning it doesn't have a huge impact on your dog's blood sugar, adding low glycemic vegetables into their diet, things like kale and spinach and squash, those kinds of things. And you're probably going to have to grind those up a lot.
What if my dog doesn't like those?
Then what you can do is grind them up and mix them with other things. So what I like to do in that case would be, let's say that I take kale, I take, kale and squash and broccoli. Okay, I chop all these up really fine by hand, or I put them in those little mini blenders, the food processor things, and I mix them all together, right? Then I put that into my dog's bowl, and then I add something on top of it to essentially flavor these vegetables. Whether that is something like an egg, just a fresh raw egg, crack it over the top of it, your dog will go crazy for it. Or if you want to add something like, bone broth, you can make your own at home. If you're not comfortable with that, you can use companies like Primalvore. Primalvore is my favorite one. And you can actually save, if you use the discount code DOGDAD, they'll give you 20% off of your order. I don't make there's no kickbacks or anything. It's just a code that I've got. So if you want to start adding bone broth to your dog's kibble diet, which is huge, adding moisture and all these things, then just use the code DOGDAD and you'll save a bunch of money on it. But
basically, what is bone broth? Can you quickly explain what bone broth is? Yeah,
so bone broth is basically, we are taking the bones that may not be you don't have to use bones that aren't appropriate to feed, but it's just basically taking bones that are, and like, let's say I'm making it at home, right? There's certain bones that I won't feed my dogs because they're too dense and it's too much of a risk of some kind of dental problem, like them fracturing a tooth or something like that. A weight-bearing bone, something that's just incredibly dense. So what we can do in those cases, instead of wasting the animal, what we can do is take those bones, put them into something like a slow cooker or an instant pot and add a bunch of water to it. You know, make sure that you've got like 1 to 2 inches of water above all the bones and stuff that you've got in there. And you essentially slow cook this, and it pulls all of these really good things out of the bones that, you know, we try to give to our dogs anyways by feeding them bones. It pulls all these amazing things out, and we can add other foods into it to basically, you know, super boost it if you want to. We can start adding things like ginger. We can start adding things like turmeric, which is great for inflammatory problems. We can start adding, and I know it's going to sound scary, but start adding small amounts of garlic. We can start adding small amounts of vegetables, and just really creating it's basically like a soup, a super nutrient dense soup of goodness that you can add to raw fed dogs diets. You can add to kibble fed dogs diets. It's an amazing addition to any diet, especially a kibble diet. Because one of the biggest problems with kibble diets is they're so void in moisture. And just by adding in bone broth to these foods, it makes it that much more digestible, makes it that much more of a good experience for your dog, and it gives them a big nutritional boost. But in this example, we can use it to flavor other things to entice our dogs into eating them.
So how about if I cook chicken, meat, and, you know, things like that, and add that to the kibble?
You can do stuff like that. The only thing you want to make sure that the only problem with that really is that a lot of times when we cook food for ourselves, we end up adding a lot of seasonings and stuff like that, you know, lots of stuff with high amounts of sodium, and so that can be bad. What I like to do is either don't put those things in with the foods that you cook, and then, you know, add the salt and stuff later so that you can then use the bone broth. Or what I like to do is save stuff that I can't feed to my dogs directly as far as bones go. So as an example, one of the strategies that I teach people in my course to keep their costs down is to reach out to people that have a bunch of stuff to get rid of in their freezer that they don't want anymore because maybe it's freezer burnt, or maybe they're a hunter and they need to make room for new food. One of these things that can happen is you'll get stuff like, you know, pork chops. And pork chop have these saw, you know, the power saw cut bones, which can be dangerous because they can be really sharp because they're already fractured. And they tend to be, those bones in pork chops tend to be really, really hard and dense and can pose a dental issue. So what I like to do if I get something like that, which I actually just did like 2 days ago, is I'll cut all the meat away from the bone on that pork chop, and then I'll save all of those bones from those pork chops to use to make bone broth later. That's just for the dogs. And then I'll add stuff to it again, all the stuff I listed before, you know, ginger, turmeric, a little bit of garlic, veggies, all these different things. So you can use the bone broth, or just the broth, I guess you would call it, from the foods that you make. But if you're going to do that, you need to do the research on the ingredients that you're adding to your own food to see if they're safe and appropriate for your dog. And I'd really encourage you to leave the really sodium, really salty, heavy stuff out of it if you're going to use that broth to give to your dogs later, because tons of sodium in your dog's diet leads to all kinds of problems.
So basically, you know, we're talking about raw diet, but what happens when we cook food?
Cooking food is an awesome, awesome, awesome alternative to kibble. Some people just can't get their head around feeding raw foods. It just scares them too much, right? They've been too programmed over time to believe that raw foods are dangerous. And, you know, there's, again, these campaigns from these pet food companies have been very successful, and they've scared essentially a lot of people away from fresh foods. But then they hear that they can cook foods for their dogs instead, and that opens up a whole new avenue for a whole other level of healthy food for their dogs compared to kibble. I have essentially no experience with cooked foods for my dogs, but there is an amazing doctor, veterinarian, who almost exclusively, to my knowledge, feeds cooked foods and has published books on cooking foods for your dogs, and it's Dr. Judy Morgan, Morgan. So if you want to feed your dogs cooked foods, maybe you need to transition into cooked foods and then maybe go to raw foods later, or maybe raw foods just scare you and you want to stick with cooked foods forever, or whatever your reasoning is. Cooked foods are amazing, and if you want to learn how to make them and balance them right, I would highly recommend checking out Dr. Judy Morgan's books. She also has stuff where weekly or even daily sometimes, I think she goes live on YouTube, she goes live on Facebook. So go to all her social media stuff and start following her, because she, as far as I'm concerned, is the bee's knees when it comes to cooking foods for your dogs.
Okay. So basically, let's say I've been feeding kibble. All I have to do is just add a little bit of fresh food to my dog's kibble, take away some kibble and add some fresh food, and go with that, start with that. And now I've been doing that for a while. I've been adding some meat, raw meat, some cooked meat, maybe some vegetables, and I've been doing it for a few months now. I want to go to next level 2, which basically I want to start feeding raw diet to my dog. So what do we do? Where do we go from here?
So, and I've been asked this question a lot because there's so many ways to do it, and that's both the blessing and the problem, because you can literally get online, and I actually have a video in my course called 101 different answers, because that's kind of what the internet is like with raw feeding right now, where you can ask one question about raw foods and get 101 different answers.
But I bet you have an answer, and I 100% agree with that. And I want everybody to hear this part. Definitely, go ahead.
And here's the problem: is that not all of them are necessarily wrong, and there's one right one. There's different ways to do it, which is why I present people with this solution. Whether you go through my course or read my book or do one of my transition programs with me, whether you read books like, one from Kimberly Gauthier called A Novice's Guide to Raw Feeding for Dogs, whether you use the website perfectlyrawsome.com, whether you go through the Dogs Naturally course over at dogsnaturallymagazine.com, I think is what the address is. Whatever avenue that it is that you choose, pick one source of information to use to get through the transition. Here's the reason. And again, it doesn't really matter which one. I'd of course love for you to sign up for my stuff, but it doesn't really matter which one you choose. Just choose one to get through the transition phase of going from whatever you're feeding now to a complete raw food diet. Because if you don't choose one, you'll end up getting confused and frustrated, because there are those different answers to the same question that aren't necessarily all wrong and aren't necessarily all right. And so I had like a perfect example. I have a student that went through my course named Jamie, and her dog was terribly ill. And the dog's veterinarian, bless their heart, did everything that they could. And she finally got to a place where she's like, I need to get on to fresh foods. And she was literally, her words, not mine, sitting on her computer at the point of tears, because every time that she thought that she had it down to where she had the information that she needed to make the switch, she would read another article or watch another video from somewhere else that completely contradicted something that she just wrote down and felt comfortable with. And again, they're not all wrong. There's just different ways to do it. So whether, again, you choose my stuff, you choose Keep the Tail Wagging, whether you choose Perfectly Rawsome, Dogs Naturally, whatever it is, there's tons of stuff. Dr. Karen's got a book out there as well, tons of stuff. Whatever you choose one to get through the transition, so you're on to fresh foods now, and then start branching out and kind of picking together the other information that you want that works best for you and works best for your dog. Because again, you have the one question, the one thing that you want to add, and there's 10 different ways to do it. And 2 out of those 10 ways might work for your dog and the other 8 just don't, or all 10 would work for your dog. But choose one source of information rather, to get yourself through the transition and then start branching out and picking together the different pieces of the puzzle that you want. But don't go through the raw feeding rabbit hole of trying to piece together the transition from multiple places, because you will end up frustrated. Like you will.
You will quit maybe as well. And,
yeah, exactly.
And you are almost there to make that transition, and then you get overwhelmed with all this information, and you say, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to go back to feeding whatever I was feeding, and that's not good. And
exactly.
Same thing applies to dog training. People, they want to start training their dogs, and they go getting their information from hundreds of places, and they get overwhelmed and they just quit training their dog. And again, my goal is here to inform dog owners that this, there is this step, one little step that you can start doing, which is basically just put your foot in the door and get started. Get started is the biggest chance that you're going to give to your dog to improve their life. Just get started feeding fresh food. Now, let's say I want to start feeding fresh food to my dog. Is there anything that can go wrong by me going and getting meat, fresh meat, raw fresh meat, and feeding my dog just fresh meat? Is there anything can go wrong with my dog?
So the biggest problem here would be making sure that, and it doesn't have to be right away unless it's a puppy, but that's going down a whole other avenue. But you want to make sure that at least over time you are providing, and this is another hot topic word, but you're providing a balanced diet, meaning that you are giving the dog everything that it is that they need in their diet, which you can't do just from giving them meat, or just from giving them bones, or just from giving them meat and bones. We have to add other things into their diet to make sure that this happens, which is why, again, doesn't matter if you use my stuff or not. If you just don't like me for whatever reason, but you still want to learn how to do this, that's awesome. I commend you, and go and learn it from somewhere else. But getting your education down is so crucial, because Dr. Becker said it best, that the only thing worse than a diet of 100% processed foods like kibble is a poorly put together raw food diet. Because at least in the kibble, we have all the essential vitamins and minerals and all these different things that the dogs need. It just comes with lots of sugar and carbs is the problem. But with a poorly put together raw food or cooked food diet, a lot of those things are missing, which can lead to a ton of different health problems. But as far as just, getting started and starting to all right, let's say that you're going with my method of doing stuff and you're on step 1, which is adding in a white meat bone-in source of food. Like, let's say just chicken is the biggest one. Obviously, you could also use turkey or rabbit, tons of other things, right? But one thing that can happen...
Did you mention bone-in?
Yes.
So bone of chicken or turkey, raw, it's safe, right?
Yes, 100%. There are some things that I recommend people do to make it even more safe, like giving their dog, if they're an adult, puppies are a whole other conversation, but if they're an adult, giving them a 24-hour at least fast from their last kibble meal to their first raw meal, because of the impact that kibble can have on the acidity of their gastric acids, their stomach acids, which is what breaks down, or I should say prepares bones for digestion. There can be all kinds of problems there, but by giving a 24-hour fast, you're really helping your dog set up for that. You can also, in the beginning, a couple of days before you start feeding your dog raw food, even while you're still feeding your kibble food, you can start providing them a digestive enzyme supplement, which can help balance out the digestive enzymes in their stomach that will, again, help properly digest these new species appropriate foods. You can also run into problems where it's just new food, and so dogs get upset stomachs. So having a case of diarrhea or something like that, or loose stools, is not uncommon. One thing that you can do to be prepared for and mitigate/fix this later if it does happen is, before you start the transition, have on hand some It's a natural food supplement powder called slippery elm bark. Get the powder, not the pills, because you'll have to use tons of pills to get the right amounts. But slippery elm bark powder. What slippery elm bark powder does is it's the extract, it's basically the inner bark of a slippery elm tree is what it is, and it's turned into powder. And what it does is it helps with inflammation, and it helps lubricate the digestive system. So if you end up feeding too much bone and your dog becomes constipated, it will reduce the inflammation in their stomach and their colon and everything else, and it will lubricate that situation. One of the biggest leading causes of diarrhea is irritation in their guts, which again, the slippery elm bark will cut down on that inflammation and irritation, which will in turn help the digestion of this food. So it's kind of a weird supplement where one supplement will help with both constipation and diarrhea, which are possible outcomes of getting switched to a raw diet. It's just like you or me going, I eat nothing but processed foods right now. I eat nothing but McDonald's and Wendy's and everything else. And tomorrow I'm starting a diet of nothing but organic chicken breast and high fiber diets with, brown rice and all these good vegetables. Even though it's more species appropriate for us, even though it's not processed foods, even though it's amazing for us, we're probably going to end up on the toilet because it's new food that our body's not used to. So that's the most common problem that people see when they get started, especially when they get started completely transitioning, is the dog's body is just not used to it. I mean, there's all kinds of other things we could go into, like the absence or lowered amounts of some of these digestive enzymes that's caused by the kibble. But that's really the biggest problem that people see is digestive upset of some kind. Sometimes it manifests itself in vomiting as well, but it's really kind of the same situation. It's just new food that your dog is not used to.
So don't panic, don't get turned off again. Just
right.
Because it's not working, you're seeing those stuff. In a way, it's the body giving that information to you that it's actually working. It's getting the. Now, I want you to understand, when you're feeding kibble, there's lots of, unfortunately, toxins building up in your dog's body. When you're giving fresh food, clean food, this fresh, clean food is going to push all those toxins out, and it's going to come out as diarrhea and vomiting, right?
Yeah, and it's just also can be just your dog is having new food that they're not used to. Like let's say that you've always in your life had chicken and you've had beef and everything else, but you've never had pork for some reason. Your body just, you yourself might just have diarrhea or something because your body just never had it before. It's just a new food that your digestive system doesn't know how to handle. Like think about if you travel to a country that you've never been to before and you start eating the local foods, like you're probably going to have diarrhea or something because it's just not something that your body is used to. And it's the same thing with the raw food. Your dog's body is just going, hold the train. What is this? I have no idea what to do with this. And they just end up having diarrhea for it. So if your dog has a bout of diarrhea or something like that, or vomits, it's not a huge deal. Keep trying. If you do have questions, though, there's places where you can ask these kinds of questions for, comfort and reassurance, and that's going to like Facebook groups. Like I have a Facebook group called Raw Feeding 101. The only other really good one that I would recommend would be Raw Feeding University. There's also another more medical but still kibble based group called Holistic Raw Fresh Foods, I believe that it's called. It's by Gregory Lucas. I mean, use the online communities that are available to you if you need reassurance from these problems, because there are some cases where diarrhea and vomiting means like you should be going to the vet, but it's really hard when you're a new pet parent feeding fresh foods to be calm about it and try and distinguish the difference between those two things, which is when the online communities come into play and you can say, this is what's happened, this is what I'm feeding my dog, this is how many times they've had diarrhea, what do you guys think? And then we can provide you feedback on that.
Great. So that's level 2. It gives you some idea that you can start feeding your dog fresh food and learn how to do it and get started. Again, raw diet, fresh food diet it's it's not a patch. It's not something that is going to just patch your dog's health issue. It's going to fix a lot of health issues. It's going to keep your dog live healthy, happy, long life. So keep learning and keep pushing yourself to get educated, to be more proactive about feeding your dog raw diet, fresh food. And as I said, in the next video which is going to be posted on Dog Dad's Scott's channel, which we're going to be going more in depth about raw diet. We're going to learn new stuff. It's 2019. We've learned so much more about raw diet, and we're going to dig into those information in the next video. And in this video, I really enjoyed learning from Scott, the master of raw diet. And Scott, before we leave, can you give us, basically I'm going to have all this information in the description, but where can people learn about you, what you offer, everything about raw diet?
So the best the best three places to go is here on YouTube, the Dog Dad channel. It'll just have me with a little black kind of background going like this. That's my channel, the only channel called Dog Dad. You can also come over to my Facebook group on Facebook, obviously, called Raw Feeding 101-Learn to Feed Raw. We've got tons of free information and stuff available there, free resources, free workshop, and so on. And then all those things you can access through rawfeeding101.com. So at rawfeeding101.com, you can check out my course, you can check out the Facebook group, you can be linked over to the YouTube channel. So really the best place to start is rawfeeding101.com, and it will start branching out to all the other things, the free resources, the workshops, the course, the videos, everything.
Good. Thank you very much, Scott, for being here. Thank you for doing this interview, and I really appreciate, and I wish you all the best. And until next time, have fun with your dog.
Agreed. Thank you, my friend.